Thank you so much for being here tonight. It is truly a gift to gather in a community for a moment like this. We're here to celebrate the release of I Am Maria, my reflections and poems on heartbreak, healing, and finding your way home. This is Maria Shriver's most personal and powerful work yet, a moving collection that invites us to sit with life's hardest moments and emerge with clarity, strength, and compassion. And just announced last week, I Am Maria has officially reached #1 on the New York Times bestseller list. It is quite an incredible milestone. Tonight isn't just a reading, it's an experience. Together, we'll hear poetry, share conversation, enjoy live music, and pause for reflection as we explore the heartbreaks that shape us, the healing that transforms us, and the journey back to ourselves. Maria is joined in conversation by the incomparable Anne Lamott, a New York Times bestselling author, spiritual thinker, truth teller whose voice has helped countless readers navigate life's messiness with humor and grace. Miss Lamott is the author of more than a dozen books, including the beloved Bird by Bird and memoirs like Traveling Mercies, Help Thanks Wow, and Dusk Night Dawn. Anne's words remind us that it's okay to be unfinished, to be seeking, to be human. We're so lucky to have her here tonight. To close our evening, we're honored to welcome two very special poetry readings. Lee Herrick, California's 10th Poet Laureate and the first Asian American to hold the post. His work speaks to belonging, identity, and resilience, drawing from his experience as a transnational adoptee and lifelong advocate for the power of language to connect us. Max Bidasha is a graduate student at Dominican University. He began writing in 2018 when he was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer and told he had 1 year to live. He's been writing ever since and has recently published his first book of poetry called The Pros and Cons of Dying. We're thrilled to welcome them both tonight, but first we begin with stillness. We're deeply honored to welcome Jack Kornfield, a beloved teacher of mindfulness and one of the leading voices in bringing Buddhist practice to the West. Jack has spent decades guiding people toward wisdom, compassion, and inner peace. Please join me in welcoming Jack Kornfield.
Hello, you Marin people. I'm happy to see you. I think I'm the palate cleanser between all the announcements and the main course that is coming. So first, let's just take a moment and take a breath or two in the middle of these busy lives that we have to have a conversation tonight that the Sufis call a sobet, which is a conversation of the heart. And one of the greatest Zen masters, Dogen, said that to become enlightened or awakened is to become intimate. That means to become intimate with yourself, with your body, with your life, with the people around you. And one of the things that I'm really delighted about tonight is both Annie and Maria are dear friends. We were just having a little bit argument about who I loved more, Annie or Maria. You know how that goes. And part of the reason many of us love them, is because of their remarkable honesty, their integrity, their compassion, their humor, and their love. And in some way, I think their honesty is an expression of love. And they offer this, to us, really what they offer is their deep humanity. And they invite us to connect with them in that way. So let yourself sense this love, compassion, joy. This is our humanity. It's what these women have shared with us. And if you look around now to those in this room, there is a kind of invitation tonight to be present for one another in the unusual way of not getting your chores and business done, but actually to listen with mindful, loving attention and the sense of openness and mystery. And with that, I invite these two remarkable women, Marie and Annie and Marie, to come out with great pleasure.
Hey.
Hi.
Hi, Annie. You're Annie.
So you're Maria.
I'm Maria. You're Annie.
Good to know, and I'm Annie.
And I'm so excited because this is my hero. I'm so excited. Yeah. I have been exploding with excitement at the idea of coming to be in conversation with you. And I'm so moved. She said to me, look, you're never going to be able to repay me for doing this. When I sat back there, she goes, you really owe me. I said, I'll do anything to pay you back. She goes, I'm only kidding. I don't know if she was.
I didn't say that.
You said,
I didn't say I was kidding.
You didn't say you were only kidding.
No.
No. Okay, well, that's what I heard. But okay. So I said, well, I'll be having to do something for you for the rest of my life, but it'll be worth it. Okay. So anyway, and I want to thank all of you for coming. I came here several years ago. For my book, I've been thinking it was one of my favorite stops. And so, but now to be here in conversation with you and to hear Jack, who, that's your best friend. I thought he was one of my best friends, but they really are best friends.
So I'd written a short introduction before hearing that Jack was going to introduce us, and I put a certain amount of energy into it, so I'm going to give the introduction.
Go for it. I can't wait to hear.
Well, I love you, and I love your book.
Thank you.
The first time we met in person, I texted you from Jane Kazmarek and Bradley Whitford's house in Los Angeles. I was helping do a fundraiser for Gaia that my very beloved priest friend Bill Rankin had founded, taking antiretrovirals to Africa to give to women in labor. And it's called the Global AIDS Interfaith Alliance. So you were the first lady then, but we'd had contact. And I texted you and I said, I'm at this incredible mansion with the most profound work that humanitarians could ever do, and I wonder if you could swing by. And you said, oh, sure. So I gave you the address, and eventually a couple of enormous black tanks arrived that turned out to be cars. And you got out of one of them, and you were wearing a somewhat worn Minnie Mouse T-shirt.
Oh, how embarrassing, really? God, I don't know why.
Well, I know, but it endeared me to you, and I thought you must have had something like over it, but it was hot, and so you had this kind of terrible Minnie Mouse T-shirt on.
I was probably in the middle of a play date when you texted me, so I just
No,
read.
you were at the airport.
Oh, that's even worse. I
airport.
was at the airport in that outfit.
I know.
Oh,
this should be in the book. So anyway, and then I got to present you on stage to all these wealthy donors, and I got so much credit for having lured you into my web. And then you made a huge donation to Gaia, and we've been texting ever since. Now, and I love your book. I'd read it through once, and I earmarked the poems that spoke most to me. And I love that it's so brutally honest and loving, and sometimes kind of cranky and gentle at the same time. And a friend of mine who was just kind of an impossible person was over, and she was having I won't name names, and she was having a tough time. So I handed her your book. And because she's very spiritual and very into the healing. And so she looked at the cover and she said, well, I don't really have time. And I went, whoa. And she said, I don't really love poetry. And I said, whatever. So she flipped it open and she read a poem from it, and she got very quiet and she said, whoa, wait a sec. And then she took it home with her. The next day I got the following text from her. She said, I am so embarrassed about what an ungrateful pig I was when you handed me Maria's book. When I got home, I just opened it randomly to a poem that expresses exactly how I feel. quote, "I want to give up, lie down, call it a day. I'm tired of trying to find my way," unquote. And then no, that was your poem, and then she wrote, "And then this kept happening. These poems are jewels. She's so vulnerable and strong and real. P.S. I'm not giving you your book back." That's why I had to hit up your caseworkers for a new book. But anyway, so I wanted to start, because some people haven't read the book yet. You wrote a very long and eloquent introduction of your life story at the beginning of the book, 30 pages or something. And I wondered if you could tell people who aren't familiar with your life story a version of that.
That's it. Wow, okay. Let's see, my life story. Well, I grew up in a big Irish Catholic family that was involved in politics, that focused a lot on achievement. And I got the message that if I would also achieve, and I would achieve big, like run for president or do something like that, I too would get noticed in my family. And so I spent a lot of my childhood trying to figure out how I was going to get my mother's attention, because I had started campaigning with my mother at a very young age. Like, my earliest memory of doing anything with my mother was when I was 4, and I was standing in Chicago outside a big department store handing out leaflets for her brother who was running for president. And I saw how happy she was doing that, so I mimicked her. And I knew that to do things like that would get her attention and hence her love. And so I was always trying to figure out how to do that. And so I talk about in the beginning of the book, I thought, well, I'll become a champion horseback rider, but then I discovered boys, and I thought, well, I'll go to the Olympics, and then I thought, well, I'll be a model, and then I discovered donuts, and I got fat, so then that wasn't gonna work. And then I thought, well, I'll be a nun, because my parents really loved priests and nuns, and that was right up there with, presidents and senators. So I thought, I'll try that. And then I heard that they had to take a vow of poverty and chastity, and I was like, oh no, this is not for me. So I was like, that's not gonna work for me. And so I went through these different options that were out there for me, and then I discovered journalism. When I was sitting in the back of the plane, my dad was the vice presidential nominee with George McGovern, and I discovered all the journalists in the back of the plane, and they seemed to be, one, having a good time, while the people in the front of the plane were not. And they also seemed to have a lot of say about what the country felt about the people in the front of the plane. And so I thought, aha, I'll go to the back of the plane and I'll work in this, and this will be a way to kind of make a difference in the world, tell stories that will change people's hearts and minds, and also my parents will see that I'm doing something good. So that was the beginning of that. And then I thought, and that when I went through school, and then I became 21, and I thought I'll go off and start my journalism career. And then I met my former husband, and I thought, aha, here's someone who's so different from anybody I've ever met. He's as far away from politics as I can get. He's a Republican, so that'll really throw everybody for a loop. So I'll hitch my wagon there, and I'll beat it and go to the West Coast and make my way in journalism. And, still trying to get my mother's attention, I think, as we all try to do. I'm one of 5 kids, 4 brothers and myself. And my mother was, as I write in here, really my role model. She was a formidable figure. She really did change the world, I believe, through her work with Special Olympics, but her social justice fight on the behalf of people with intellectual disabilities. That was her mission, and she powered through it like a locomotive, and she knocked everybody down in her path to create legislation to change the world for people and families with intellectual disabilities, because she had a sister with an intellectual disability. So that was my model of what a woman was supposed to be doing. And she dressed like a guy. She wore tweed pants. She smoked cigars. She carried a briefcase. She went to work. She never brushed her hair. She never wore makeup. She was just on a mission. And so I kind of tried to emulate that in the journalism space, being on a mission, trying to get something done. And then I developed this life in California, and my then husband decided to run for governor, which was kind of out of nowhere. And then I lost my job. I became first lady. And then my mother died, my father died, my uncle died. I lost my job, and I lost my husband. I left my husband. And that all happened in a period of 2 years, and I found myself on the floor, and hence began my journey back. Not back to myself, but back to being able to stand up, being able to move my way forward. It's where I discovered poetry in a meandering way, but not poetry like the kind of poet your friends saying, I don't buy poetry, which is a lot of people. In fact, the publisher was like, people don't buy poetry. And I'm like, this is reporter poetry. And he's like, well, what is that? I was like, well, it's what I'm doing. I'm reporting on the insides to get outside. I'm going back so I can go forward. And I'm reporting on, was trying to understand where my heartbreak started, where my sense of loneliness and loss began. And I knew it didn't begin with, the end of my marriage. I knew it must have begun somewhere long ago. And so I kind of went back in time and started writing from a different place than I had been writing before. And that brings me to the poems. But that's kind of the beginning to kind of, that's a quick way through a lot of stuff happened in my childhood that I went back and looked at. And I guess that's kind of a nice bow on, a quite tumultuous childhood and life. Yeah.
Well, your large, extended Irish Catholic family has had tiny, tiny addiction issues.
Uh-huh.
Right.
That's right.
Right. And a lot of your life...
Like very many Irish Catholic families and other families, right, yeah.
Yeah. And a lot of your life was lived in reaction to other people's addiction and self-destruction, and your efforts to pump people up and to lift people up using your own life force, but because people couldn't connect with their own. Right. And they were connecting with the fame and the fortune, and then there was you. It was like little Maria, and you were like the water boy, but what you were offering was life force to try to save everybody, and none of them wanted to be saved, or none of them seemed to want to be saved.
I think people don't know how to be saved,
Maybe,
right?
yeah.
I think really more that. I think, certainly I look at my mother's generation, and they were of a generation, I'm sure many people were raised by people of that era where they didn't talk about anything. There was no culture, there was no conversation on the larger scale to talk about what does grief mean? What is the impact of grief? Why does one want to achieve? What is one looking for in achievement? I think, many Irish Catholics and many other kinds of families drink to dull that pain because, there was no such thing as grief therapy. I mean, by the time I was a little girl, my mother had lost her older brother, her sister, her other sister had an intellectual disability and was sent away. And when I was very young, then both of her brothers were assassinated. So for me, and there was no conversation. There was no stopping. So when I went back to think about that, my heart broke for my mother because I thought to myself, no one spoke to her grief. No one explained anything to her. She had no outlet for her pain. Neither did her brothers have an outlet. Neither did her mother. Her mother went to church every day, as did my mother and my father. But I had so much compassion for my mother to not be afforded nobody speaking to her and say, would you like to go to therapy? Now, I don't think she would have anyway, but I think, I've grown up in a time where when I was hurting, the option of therapy was available to me. The option of grief therapy was spoken to me about that. And so I had different opportunities than my mother, other people in my family. And I took advantage of those opportunities because I saw the collateral damage of achievement. And, I think achievement is wonderful. Changing the world is wonderful. But you have to look at the cost of all of these things. And Do you want to put yourself out there and risk 11 children growing up without a father? These are decisions that I think people have to make when they go into, whether it's the political arena or they want to work 24/7, whatever it is. And I don't think that was afforded her generation.
And all our fathers had been to war and
Right.
absolutely did not bring it up. And it was Eisenhower afterwards, which was green lawns. And the men I knew, my father's best friends, it never, ever, ever came up unless they were extremely drunk. And then they could talk about it with this kind of rage against the Japanese or whatever, But it was never something like, wow, you have witnessed the end of the world. You have lived through it. You have seen your friends die nearby. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, and like my father was in the war, like someone, but never spoke about it either.
Ever.
And several of my cousins, and I grew up in a family where everybody ate together, cousins, not just you didn't just eat with your siblings, you ate with your cousins and your aunts and uncle all the time. And people were struggling with addiction, but nobody spoke about it. So I grew up thinking that that's the way you went along. You just don't talk and you power through.
Well, my mom was from Liverpool, and it was that same thing, that you don't complain, and tough upper lip.
Yeah, definitely don't complain.
Yeah, and everybody eats, whoever's there, everybody's fed. You don't complain, power through. You wrote a kind of a prose epigraph at the beginning of I Am Maria, and I loved it, but I want to read. On a hilltop in Petaluma, you buried the woman who was tougher than tough, the part that was filled with self-loathing, self-criticism, self-hatred. So that is where this new book begins. But I wondered if you could tell us about that day, the details of the day, and which hill were you on in Petaluma, and who were you with?
Not that far. Well, I went to the Hoffman Institute, which is, if other people have been here. And I have no idea how I got there, actually. And its tagline is, I think Liza, who runs Hoffman, is somewhere here. It's for people who are serious about change. And I wanted to go someplace that was serious about change. And so I applied to the Hoffman Institute, and I went there, which is in Petaluma. And they take you through a very intense experience, looking at your childhood, looking at your patterns, looking at your parents, and really taking responsibility for your life. And I'll never forget the first day they walk around and they say, I see you and I love you. And I'm like, bullshit, you don't even know me. They're like, okay, we have to work with this girl, And then the last day they were like, I see you and I love you. I said, I see you and I love you too. And I saw me and I loved me too. And I saw my parents and I loved them too. And they have a great, wonderful experience where you sit with your parents when they're 12 and you talk to them and you write, what are they thinking? What are their hopes? What are their dreams? And it was a very profound experience for me to think of them as young kids and the kind of life they wanted to live and what were their hopes and dreams, because our parents, right, have these entire lives before we ever come in, right? And so that was a very helpful experience to me. I've been back to it since, but I had gone to cognitive therapy, I sought shamans, I did plant medicine, I did all kinds of stuff to try to understand how I ended up on a hotel floor. I wanted to understand my own restlessness, my own drive, why I had left the East Coast for the West Coast. I wanted just to understand myself and where I fit in this larger family, where I felt oftentimes I was incredibly proud to be in my family. I felt invisible in my family. Then I felt visible. I felt it was really the only thing that people were interested in me. And what's kind of funny on this book tour, which, and I explain in the beginning of the book why it's called I Am Maria, but I've met a lot of people, or I've done podcasts to promote the book, as one does, and people would say to me on the podcast, like, gosh, I don't know, you've done so much. I don't know why you would ever have any insecurities or feeling invisible or not knowing yourself. I mean, but can we just talk about being a Kennedy? And so I was like, yeah, that's fine. But it's just such an interesting thing to, and I see it very often in all kinds of families, whoever is doing the more, quote, public thing at any given time, people focus on that person. Whether it's, one kid goes off to law school and the other kid might be an artist, people go over to the kid in law school so often, right? Or whatever it is. And human nature, and everybody asks each other all the time, what do you do? And that's the other thing I loved about Hoffman is you couldn't talk about what you did. And you couldn't talk about the news, and you couldn't talk about sports. And so they were just dealing with you as a human. And that was something that was so new for me and so fulfilling for me and so beautiful for me. And it allowed this kind of like driving voice that was in my head to quiet down and say, well, there's so many people out there that just love you and you're just fine, and they don't know anything about you, or they're not even talking to you about what they normally talk to you about. So that was very helpful to me to be able to quiet that voice, understand where that all came from, and bury it.
And tell people why you called it I Am Maria.
I called it I Am Maria because my entire childhood was spent trying to explain who I was,
Right.
and people saying, well, no, but I would say, they'd say, who are you? Which one are you? And I'd say, well, I am Maria. They're like, no, but which Kennedy are you? I'd say,
Right,
well,
right.
I am Maria. And they're like,
Yeah.
but you're a Kennedy, right? And I'm like,
Yeah.
well, I'm Eunice's daughter, but Eunice is a Kennedy, right? Is your last name? And I would be like, well, and so my message was, as children take on these messages, that being Maria wasn't enough, being Maria Shriver wasn't enough. So it fueled this, like, I'm gonna show you who Maria Shriver is, just for external validation, never kind of focusing on my insides as, being the place that I should go for internal validation.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you see The White Lotus?
Speaking of external, no, tell me all about it.
Okay.
I've heard about this guy named
Wow, it's
Saxon.
really trippy.
His
No.
ass, I heard, is unreal.
Yeah, unbelievable.
That's the other question I got on this
Yeah.
tour, nonstop,
Yeah,
about Saxon.
yeah.
But Patrick
yeah.
is not like Saxon.
Okay, no. I assumed
just-
that he was not like Saxon.
Yeah,
but
he's not
anyway.
like Saxon.
Um,
He does have a cute butt. Somebody said to me, have you ever seen his butt before? I'm like, I'm his mother. I birthed him. What? I mean, hello.
I know, hello.
I mean,
I
hello.
know, hello.
I wiped it.
I know.
Yeah, I mean, really.
Right.
Yeah,
Will you read us a poem?
yeah. But I have to tell a story on you, Annie.
Oh.
Okay, so she's talking about the first time we met, but the first time I ever contacted her, I was First Lady. I don't know if you remember this. You do? Yeah. So I was doing, when I got to Sacramento, they're like, okay, you're the First Lady. I'm like, what is that? What does that mean? And they're like, we just make it up. You figure out, you can do ornaments. I'm like, ornaments? I'm not going to do ornaments. And they were like, well, this is your office. And it said special project of the governor. And I was like, I'm not a special project of the governor. I'm like, I have to put my name on the door. I'm going to run an operation out of here. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to do this women's conference. And they were like, yeah. And I'm going to have all of these extraordinary people. They're going to come and speak, and we're going to inspire women, empower women, because California has more women in it than any other state, more women business owners, more women graduates, and all kinds of things. And I'm going to, gather everybody around, and we're going to empower them, and I'm going to bring the most inspiring people. And I invited all my journalist friends to be the moderators. And I thought, okay, who do I want to come? I'm going to call and invite the people that I admire. And so I reached out to her, and I was like, hi, I'm Maria Shriver, I'm the First Lady of California, and I have this women's conference, and I just want to extend an invitation. I'd love for you to come and speak. I got a beautiful, right away, a response. I would never, ever come to anything that a Republican had their name on. I don't believe in the Republican Party. Yeah, it's against my principles. I will never, and don't ever ask me again, don't ever reach out to him. I just can't stand it, what's going on. You know, I was like, damn. I was like, oh, so I responded back. I said, well, you know, thank you so much for responding. And I so hope maybe we'll stay in touch. And you know, I'll maybe circle back another time. And then, like 2 days later, or a day, she wrote me a note. She said, I have so much shame about my response.
I said, I am such an asshole. And I am so ashamed of my response.
Yeah, and I was like, I love this woman even more. And that's how we started our love relationship, or my end of it. Because I thought, what I loved about that is it was so brutally honest. And I just loved that. I was like, go girl, you know. And I was used to people, you know, saying all kinds of stuff, so it wasn't like new. But I was just like, wow, that's cool. So what am I reading? I forgot. Well, what poem? Any poem? Any poem. Oh, well, I'll just, something else. Okay. Well, I hope that my hope in doing this book and writing this poetry,
Wait, I know what. Let me interrupt you. Why don't you read the first one? Because I wanted one of us to close at the end with the last one. So does that make sense to read the first one?
I can read anything. I can read The Padded Door. I can read Small. Okay, I'll read The Padded Door. Okay, this is called The Padded Door. The padded door, it stood guard, separating her from me. I can see it now so many years later. There actually were two doors that blocked my way, 2 doors with padded leather and studs and locks, 2 doors that kept out the noise, 2 doors that kept me from you. I often banged but knew you couldn't hear. I often knocked but I knew I would be met with silence. Once I saw my brother curled up on the floor outside your padded door. He was crying. He just lay there whimpering. No one heard him. I watched and listened. I looked and turned away. I didn't pick him up. I didn't hold him or calm him. I didn't know what to do to stop his tears because no one stopped mine. I'm sorry I didn't pick him up and take him to his bed. I'm sorry I didn't knock down those doors. I'm sorry for the pain that kept you inside that room, inside your heart, inside your mind. Padded doors locked out so much. They locked me away from you. The padded door, I still see it. I'm still knocking. Can you hear me? Will you ever? That's... I have since met, believe it or not, other Irish Catholic daughters whose mother also had padded doors.
Padded doors.
So I'm thrilled to find out I wasn't the only one.
Yeah. Well, because you think padded door, you think mental institution, right?
Right.
Yeah, and then this is a padded door that was her armor and her a moat between the mess of life and kids and it all. It was her.
Yeah, and it's made me think about the padded doors that we all have actually inside of ourselves. And when I wrote that, and so many of these poems, you know, I didn't grow up writing poetry. I wrote, you know, journal news pieces. I wrote speeches. I've written testimonies. I've written journals. But when I sat down after I had learned meditation, and I kind of sat with quiet, and I just started to let a different voice emerge for me. And it was a voice that I was really unfamiliar with. And it started writing about things like that were surprising to me. And it then made me think about, where was my padded door? What was I keeping out? What was my responsibility with that? And the padded doors that we all have in some way because we're afraid, because we don't know how to deal with our grief. We don't know how to we feel lost, so we put up a version of a padded door. And I'm hoping that with these poems that we can connect through our heartbreak and through our healing, because it's one of the few things I think we all have in common. And it has enabled me to connect with people in a different way, which has been so moving to me, because I'm usually connecting in almost like a political way or an advocacy way or a mission-oriented way. And this has enabled me to connect and hear people's stories that I'm certain they wouldn't have told me or shared with me had these poems not activated something in them. And that's been the kind of universal reaction of the book. People have come up to me and said, this is my story. This is my experience in life. And that's what's been so beautiful about this experience for me.
Well, a lot of the book is about the end of your marriage to Arnold and the extreme pain and really terrifying emotions, many of which you'd kept at bay. And I want to quote, it's kind of a long quote, but the feelings I felt at the end of my marriage are hard to put into words. I was consumed with grief and racked with confusion, anger, fear, sadness, and anxiety. I felt emotionally bereft and disconnected from life as I knew it. I also felt deeply disconnected from myself, or who I thought I was. I had been with Arnold since I was 21 years old, my entire adult life. I barely remembered who I was before I met him. I was unsure now of who I was, where I belonged, or who I belonged to. Honestly, it was brutal, and I was terrified. So then what happened?
What happened?
You fell apart. You let yourself...
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And I think anybody who's been in a long relationship, that was 35 years, it's a long time, 4 children, and you have to pick yourself back up, or you have to choose to pick yourself back up. So,
how old was your youngest when you
He was
separated?
in 8th grade.
Oh, wow, a kid.
Yeah,
A little boy.
and my children are obviously everything to me, and I wanted to make sure that I picked myself up first and foremost for myself, but for them as well. I wanted also, to make sure that I didn't, create a choice that they had to choose between their dad and myself. I wanted them to have a relationship, a wonderful relationship with their father. I knew it would take time, but I wanted to promote that. And I kind of tried to develop a vision for a new kind of family in my mind, and I started working my way towards that. I wanted to work my way towards my children's wedding, work my way towards future birthday parties, work my way towards one of our kids having a child and all being able to be in the same room and it to be okay and no one to feel awkward and all that sort of thing. And I've done that, and I'm really proud of myself. And
Well, yeah, I mean, you got your miracle and you paid through the nose for it.
Yeah.
That's how it works.
Yeah, and I did a lot of work to get there, and but I also knew that I had to go back so that I could go forward, and that's what this book
That's what
is
these poems are about. Yeah.
right? And that's actually the only paragraph about Arnold in the whole book.
Yeah.
And so this isn't in any way, it's a book about my journey, and as somebody said to me the other day, it's a book about grief with no grievances. And
wow, I love that. Yeah.
That's important because this book isn't about pointing a finger at anybody, gotching, blaming. It's about owning.
Right.
And I wanted to own my life, separate from the family that I grew up in, separate from whom I was married to, separate. I wanted my children to feel free of that. I didn't want them to be undone by that experience, which was challenging because it was public. And I wanted them to feel good about themselves, that they could walk out with their shoulders high, and that ultimately we would be a family. And it might not be the kind of family I had envisioned, but it was the kind of family that we were going to build, and I was going to lead the way with that. And that's what we've done, and that's what we have. And so we'll have a wedding in the fall, and we'll all be there. And, you know, my daughter's had children. We've all sat around, we laugh, and we go our separate ways. And I wish him only the best, and I wish myself the best, too.
Well, as much of this, why I read that particular passage was not for the Arnold. It was because, you know, I got married for the first time after I started getting Social Security, right? So I don't have the same experiences.
And I love that.
Yeah.
And that's my, like, not that I want to get married again, but I love that you fell in love. I was just asking Neil backstage, you know, how does that work? How did you do that?
Right.
And I'm a big believer, actually, in marriage. I love, you know, being married. And I think love is the greatest thing. We were talking about that. I think, you know, if we could all feel loved as children and feel okay with just being enough.
But very few people did.
Yeah.
That's why the poems are so universal. But what I mean is that I don't have these experiences of being with someone your whole entire, I don't have any of that, but I have been consumed with grief and racked with confusion, anger, fear, sadness, and anxiety, and lay sobbing on the floor of the hotel, you know? And so what you have been able to do with these poems is to make it universal so that that's what people are saying to you. Yeah, that's exactly what it was like for me. Yeah, me too. That's exactly what it was like. My details are different.
Yes.
So, you know, birth, death, new life, resurrection, the spring. You know, we've had a really tough winter. I'm not going to name names, but it's birth, and in the poems, birth, new birth, and then death, because that's part of life, and then new life. And I wanted a lot of the book is about healing and the joy that not just followed the pain, but that was available to you because you did the pain consciously, with a lot of beautiful, tender support and being lifted up when you were going under.
Yeah, and I think I write in there that I was the beneficiary of a master class in friendship. And I think when anybody is, you know, down for whatever it is, they lose a job, they you know, lose a marriage, they lose whatever they view as their life, right? That, you know, that's when we need our friends. That's when we need our family, and to mirror for us who we are, who we can be, that we're going to be okay, that there is going to be a future, that we will find our way home. And when I talk about finding our way home, it was to find my way back to myself, to feel like it was okay for me to want to heal, that it was okay for me to be standing straight up on my own, that it was okay for me to be at the head of the table with no one at the other head of the table. I remember the first time I sat down at my table, and I was at the head of the table and the other seat was empty. I was like, okay, you know, these small things. Or I took a picture, you know, with me and my 4 kids, and I was like, okay, that it's all different, right? That it's okay. And my priest actually was really, you know, really helpful to me in saying, you know, that's a family. You're okay. You have a family. You're moving forward. And when I would go back to Massachusetts, my family would gather around and said, you're home here, and we love you. And I think, you know, somebody putting their arms around you, whenever that moment is in your life where you need somebody to put your arms, not ask you questions, to just say, we love you, you're home here. And that's such a beautiful thing.
You know, I brought you a nun tonight because I know.
Yeah, where is she? You brought me a nun.
Well, is Sister Gervais here in the... She's somewhere here, and I love her. Oh, there you are, my darling. Jack Kornfield.
Where is she?
She's over there. I'll bring her back after the event.
Well, you know, I told you, I mean, I write a lot in here about going to different convents and the nuns. And, you know, somebody told me the female saints were the first warrior poets. And
well, you keep your mitts off Sister Gervais because she's mine. I have dibs on her.
I'm like in awe of the nuns, and I was educated by the nuns. And when I got separated, I went to live with the nuns because it was
it's home.
What?
It's a kind of home.
A quiet, calm, and a sisterhood. And I had all brothers, and the nuns. I grew up, you know, watching the nuns really be the changers of society, the social justice workers, right? The people that were doing all the tough work in the church and out in the streets, and they were the heroines that really that I was, you know, spoken to about by my mother. And, you know, we went, even, you know, people who were working in the Catholic worker, Dorothy Day, and others who were really trying to change the world through their faith lens. And that's when I think of nuns, that's what I think of is women who are changing the world, changing issues through their social justice and their faith.
I think of them, I do too. And I think of Mother Teresa in long years, a decade of severe depression, out at the curb at 5 a.m. every morning, with holding a dying man in her lap, and with their heads on her knees, and bathing their faces and giving them sips of water, because she recognized the crucified Christ in each of them.
Yeah.
So, but because
she has this beautiful line: "Is everybody can go find their own Calcutta."
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And my mother was a huge fan of Mother Teresa, and actually brought her to the United States the first time. And they gave her a Kennedy Flame of Hope Award. And I remember she came to our house for dinner, and my mother's like, "I want you to come downstairs and meet this nun." And I'm like, another nun is coming over to dinner? And she's like, "Yes, just come down." She's at the table. I was like, I'm on my pink, you know, as a teenager, I had my pink telephone. I'm like, I'll be down later. And so I have this picture of me sitting at the table with Mother Teresa, and I'm like, I was like, anyway. And my mother went to her funeral, and my mother was, you know, never stopped talking about the extraordinary work that she did. And what I also love about her is she was very open in a book about her struggles with her faith. And so,
it's the same stuff as your poems.
Yeah.
It's the exact same stuff as your poems.
So I love that, because then you think like, okay, she struggled with her faith. Yeah. I'm okay that I'm struggling, or whatever because every single person in this auditorium has a struggle.
Yeah.
I know you're all sitting here with some incredible story and some incredible struggle going on. And you, as you were saying, Annie, you know, you've been struggling. You struggled with anxiety and fear and shame and all this. We all have that. Mm-hmm. And I think the more we take the veil off of it, then we don't carry this shame around that we're like the only people like who's ever landed on the floor in a hotel.
Right.
I think hasn't everybody been on the floor sometime?
Everyone's been on the floor. I just wanted to, we only have a few minutes. I can't stand it. They won't come for us, will they?
No. So who's going to come? The nuns are going to come for us.
I heard a sermon while I was just immersed in your book two Sundays ago, and the pastor came out, and she was talking about when Lazarus is dying, and Jesus' best friend and the sisters, Mary and Martha, and they beg Jesus to come heal him, and Jesus is doing other things, and he doesn't come. He doesn't come to Bethany, and then he finally, where they all live, and Lazarus has died, and he's been in the tomb with a rock pushed in front of it for 4 days, and Jesus says calls out to Lazarus. That's where, you know, the famous line, Jesus wept for the grief, not just of Lazarus, but of the whole world dying and bearing these really impossible, possibly broken hearts. And Jesus says to Lazarus, Lazarus come out, and the sisters are freaked out because they're girls and they're women, and he'll have grave clothes on. He'll have clothes he will have been dead for 4 days. And then Jesus says to the disciples and everybody around, they go, loose him and let him go. And what he means is, take away the grave clothes. He wants Lazarus there out back in life, alive, but without the grave clothes on him. And the minister had put all of these scarves and shawls and shamatas on her, and she just started taking them off. And she said, this is the grave cloth of perfectionism, and something both of us have struggled.
Yes.
And this is the grave clothes of inadequacy, and this is the grave clothes of my sick ego and my terrible suffering. And she individually just took them off, and she said, you know, we unbind ourselves from the clothes that kept us barely breathing. And then she played a song. It was a Christian gospel song, but really happy, and it was called Take the Shackles Off My Feet So I Can Dance. And I thought about all the joy poems. In fact, I'm so anxious about running out of time.
No, don't worry about it.
Okay.
I love that, because I think that's kind of what,
that's what these
exactly. I
poems are
love
about.
that. And that's my
Yeah.
hope, that anybody who feels that they're wearing the grave clothes of inadequacy, so did I, the grave clothes of shame, so did I, the grave
fear
clothes
that
of
we're secretly
humiliation, all of
disgusting.
these
Yeah,
things
yeah,
that is our common humanity. That
Yes.
is our common heartbreak. That is, and my hope is that is what will actually bring us together. That in that common story, from then to now to beyond, and I, say that to my children, you will have these experiences yourself, right? You will have them, and at some point you too will begin to shed them, I hope, and you too will feel like they're just too heavy to carry. And I hope you don't wait as long as Mommy did to be kind to yourself and to let these things go that just keep you behind a padded door.
Right, but you need someone to say them out loud to you so that you grok it, that you know exactly what I'm talking about, that your kids know exactly what you're talking about because you wrote it. Yeah. But I have wanted to read a poem from the healing part of the journey.
Okay.
It's I think it's at the beginning of Loving, but maybe not. It's right before Loving. It's called Healed. The man said, my sense is that you are still broken, living with sadness and despair. My sense is you haven't triumphed. You're simply trying to get there. Aren't we all just trying to get by, I said, trying to hang on, trying our very best? Healed to me might not look happy to you. But the truth of life, as it's unveiled itself to me, is that some days one is grateful, joyful, triumphant. Other days one is lonely or sad, unclear about the path ahead. Some people walk through life always looking joyful, content, at peace, happy. Others of us navigate a different, no less valuable road. Life has brought healing and happiness. Life has brought trouble and tragedy. Going through it brings humility and gratitude for where one finds oneself. I feel triumphant, I said to the man. Not on every day, but on most. Healing looks like that, he said. One step backward, one forward, one breath at a time, one smile at a time. Life is a marathon indeed. I've run, I've crawled, I've walked, I've jumped for joy. I am what healing looks like. I have been healed by words that have touched my heart. Music that's torn down my walls. I've been healed by the wind and the rain, the plants and the flowers. I've crawled thinking I'd never walk again, and yet hands broke through the clouds and pulled me up. Voices shouted, stand up, carry on, continue. That's Jesus to Lazarus, come forth. That's what triumph feels like, said the woman. Healed is being here, standing here, loving all who passed through, loving those who stayed, loving me, loving you, healed. Damn straight I am. So, what is the favorite question that you love to be asked that you wished I had asked you tonight?
I don't have a, who's your hero? And then I could have said you.
All right, well, here's my least favorite question.
Oh, okay, here
good.
it comes.
What's next?
Yeah,
Which is
that
usually asked on stage during publication of a book that has been out for 3 or 4 days.
Yes. I know. You know, I'm sitting in the moment. For the first time, I have nothing next. I'm really relishing this experience. I'm present for it. I'm focused on it. I have other work that I'm really passionate about, my Alzheimer's work, my women's health work, my Sunday paper work that I put out every week. These are all, thank you. Those are all things that I'm really passionate about, but I really tried to focus these last couple weeks on this book and the unveiling of it so that I could be present for, if the arrows came, I would feel them. If the love came, I would feel it. And when I found out that it was #1, I felt like my whole life almost flashed before me. I felt this extraordinary moment of just gratitude. I cried for hours. I cried for the life I had led, for my parents. I cried for myself. I cried for everything I'd been through, and that I felt kind of finally at this age free. Yeah. I can't really explain it, but I was just like, you know, I was like, okay, now I get to do something completely different. I have no idea what that is, but I'm present for it, and I'm so glad I'm alive. I'm so glad that I have this relationship with my children, that I have grandchildren that I know, who think I'm pretty cool so far. And
what's your grandma name?
Mama G.
Mama G.
Mama G. Yeah. And I'm fun. I'm the like crazy, you know, wild grandmother. You know, I spit at them with water fountains and all kinds of water, you know, balloon stuff. But that sounds funny, I spit at them, but I just play water games. But I feel, you know, just so grateful to everybody for the reaction to this. Grateful that I can feel, the reaction to this, and that I don't have a door up anymore. And I'm grateful to be alive and grateful to all the people who helped me navigate my way forward. And I just feel like it's a blessing. And I have walked it with God, and I'm very grateful that He didn't give up on me. Yeah.
That's the miracle, right?
Yeah.
Well, I know part of what
I thought you were going to ask me something other. You're like, here's the worst question. That's like nothing.
Well, did you want to talk about your cousin Bobby?
Oh yeah. I just can't wait. Yeah. Oh. But, you know, no, I don't. But you know, obviously, very few people have ventured into this territory with me. But, you know, I grew up with Bobby. I've spent my whole life with Bobby. And I love Bobby, and he's responsible for a lot of my work. In Alzheimer's research, women's health and research. I think back to 5 months ago, I was standing in the White House with then President Biden and Dr. Biden, and we had just come out of a 1.5 years of more work on women's health and research than it had ever been done in this country. And I was super proud of all of the what we had been able to accomplish in the year and a half since he first announced the very first ever Women's Health and Research Initiative out of the White House, and was really looking forward to all of the work that could be done on that issue coming out of NIH. And then, of course, I've been working in the Alzheimer's advocacy space for 20 plus years because my dad had Alzheimer's. And I did a big report to the nation which rewrote the narrative on Alzheimer's to put women at the center of that issue, and the lack of funding, particularly on women's health, to understand why women are disproportionately impacted by Alzheimer's. So 20 years of my work is been eviscerated or silenced or stopped in a very short period of time. And I'm in my book phase at the moment, and I'm trying to find the right voice and the right time to address those issues. And I will, but not right now. Just now I'm trying to focus.
And what?
I'm just trying to focus on this for a moment, and then I'll focus on that.
I just want to add what you said backstage, which was you talked of, like there's a great Christian hymn that says, he looked beyond our faults and saw our needs. And you talked about that with your cousin Bobby, that you see beyond the actions that are anathema to us, and that you see this kid you grew up with, and this kid whose dad gets killed, and you see this kid who's really lonely and has struggled with addiction and nearly died and has resurrected, and you look to that person too who is still fully alive inside there.
Well, I try to do that, yes, because I was present for all of that.
I know.
And so I had a front row seat to all of that and to the pain of all of that. And I also have a front row seat to the pain that other people are experiencing because of certain decisions that are made. There's a lot of yikes to have a yikes about today. It's not just him. There's, you know, as a member of the media, I'm yikes about what's coming out. You know, how this administration deals with the media, how this administration deals with a lot of different things. So it's not just in that respect there. But I do have a different understanding of him than perhaps other people have. And I also don't believe, as I write in this book, about taking family issues into the public square. And I think that I think there's 50 or 60 million people who have family members that they disagree with politically. So I'm sure I'm not alone in this situation where other people are navigating family members who they have a difficult time with. And so I understand when people come to me and expect me to do something immediately about it. And they probably expect themselves to do something immediate with their cousins or brothers or whatever it is.
Good luck with that.
Yeah, and so I understand that this is a challenging time for many families. It's a challenging time for mine. And but I always go back to the love. His children are at my house all the time. I care deeply about them, and I intend to sit at the table. I continue to want to sit at the table with him until our dying days. And how I speak to him is between him and I.
Absolutely. Thank you. We ran out of time so long ago, but part of what Maria wanted to do tonight, besides us to get to hang out together, was to promote
poetry.
And to share with you the world that we have been given life by.
That's right. You said when I got in here, there's so many poets here. There's poets walking around backstage.
Everywhere. And there are. And we have two other, beside Maria, delectable poets to read their work to you tonight, but I wanted to end this part of our evening together. I wondered if you would read the very last poem in the book. Here you are. You got a book?
Yes, I'm so excited that we have our poet laureate.
Yeah, the California poet laureate is
Yes,
here.
and we have a student also named Max, and we've been traveling around the country, Annie, where people have been reading their poetry, some who've never written poetry ever in their life. And then my friend Elizabeth Lesser said, I don't write poetry. I said, well, just try. And she stood up and wrote a poem that blew my mind. Oh, did you see it? Unbelievable. But she's like, oh my God, I think I like poetry. I think I like to write. I was like, don't worry about the rhyming thing. So, yeah. So which one, the open field? Okay, I talk a lot about the open field, which I got from Rumi. Okay. The open field. I hear you calling my soul. I long to go, but somehow my feet will not move. They stand stuck where I am, but I can see where I need to go. I can close my eyes and see it. I smell the fresh grass. I feel the wind on my face. Finally, the wind is soft. I no longer need it to batter me. I'm growing. Yes, I'm growing. My feet are moving one step closer to my soul's longing. I close my eyes. I can see the vastness. The breadth of space no longer scares me. I no longer need the fence to close me in. I'm growing. I'm growing. I hear that voice within me. You once were muffled behind torrents of tears. Now I hear you. Once so faint that I couldn't make out the words, much less who they came from. But today I know that voice to be mine. I no longer sense the trembling. I'm growing. Let me speak. Let me speak. My feet now move, my voice now works, my heart still beats. My mind is becoming clearer. I no longer fear the wind, the rain, the dark of night. I no longer fear that I don't know where the open field is. I no longer fear that I may stand alone. I'm growing. I've grown into me. The open field, out beyond, as Rumi said, out beyond, as the Almighty said, out beyond. I'll meet you there. I'm here. I've grown. Look at me.
Amen.
Yes. So thank you. Now I'm really honored to introduce Max, who's a student here, and he's going to read his poem. There you are, Max.
So as you know, I was told I had a year left to live in 2018, and I'm still here. Thank you. When I was told I had that year left to live, I never once thought, God, why me? I thought, okay, what do I want to do? So I started writing, and I wrote this book called The Pros and Cons of Dying. Thank you for chuckling, by the way, earlier. And this is a sentiment I've seen a lot from well-intentioned people trying to be supportive, and they would often say, fuck cancer. So I wrote a poem about it. 2 words you will never hear me say, because those 2 words never helped anyone, never saved anyone, never cured anyone, never brought our loved ones back to life, never created joy, never put cancer into remission. But what it did do for me was to see my world differently, help me find my passion, help me appreciate the taste of strawberries even more, help me learn to write, help me know what I am made of. Because of cancer, I met you. I met myself. I learned what true love is, what true friendship is. Because of cancer, I am here in front of you. Maybe not physically, but what you are hearing, seeing, holding, reading is my heart and spirit and my wisdom. Because of cancer, I wrote this book. I wrote my plays. I wrote songs. I produced plays, acted, sang in front of strangers, cried, laughed, bared my soul in front of strangers, lived my life as authentically as possible. Because of cancer, my dreams are completely fulfilled. I am fulfilled. I am filled to the top with the kindness you've given me, love you've shown me, grace I didn't deserve, beauty I've witnessed, sweetness I'm engulfed in. No, you will never hear me say fuck cancer. Thank you. And this is my last one. This is called Way to Go. I just thought this is such a beautiful way of thinking about dying. So, way to go. What do I want my obituary to say? He died of natural causes. Too boring. He died of cancer. Too sad. He died because he was loved so deeply that the love took over every cell, tissue, organ, bone until his body couldn't possibly contain all the love he had and all the love he was given, until he exploded from love so strongly that every cell made of love flew into the sky and became stars visible to the naked eye. What a perfect way to go. Thank you so much. I love you and I see you. So this next amazing poet, he is the poet laureate of California, by the way. A new friend. He's lovely, amazing, and please help me welcome Lee Herrick to the stage.
Thank you, Max. That was amazing. I am so happy to be here, and I was asked to say just a little bit about myself, and I'll read one poem. But first, I want to just say how I could have listened to that all night. Thank you for the... And Maria, for the light you are, for the gift of this incredible book, and for all that you do. And I hope you will all join me in applauding so that I don't feel like I'm the only one who thinks you are a national treasure. So thank you so much. And I'll just briefly say what a joy it is to be California Poet Laureate. It has been expansive and eye-opening and joyful. And, I Am Maria. She read one of my favorite poems, The Open Field. But there are so many I love in the book. And I was listening to an interview that she gave recently where she wondered, when did my loss start? And I think you mentioned this tonight. When did my longing begin? And this is where poetry entered my life. So I was born in South Korea sometime in late 1970, and I was adopted into a white family, Caucasian family who were living in Danville, not too far from here. I've never met my first mother or first father, and I was raised in a loving family with whom I'm still close. But I regularly felt like an outsider. I was loved, thank goodness. And I had many friends, thank goodness. But sometimes I felt so alone, I could almost vanish. And books and literature and poetry were the light and the way through for me. I discovered that poetry was the place for the sadness, the loss, and the doubt to become something else that felt like hope. In poetry, I could ask questions, I could imagine. It was a place for the leftover anger to become something else, and a place for the leftover love that I couldn't name. In short, I realized that poetry is a kind of liberation, and it has been really inspirational tonight to hear how poetry has impacted your life. And I say this with all seriousness, I do think there's poetry in each of you. And so when the time is right, if it's right, on your own terms, however it emerges, I hope that you will remember the poetry in you. And so the poem I'm going to read is from my latest book, and I just call it a love song for my first mother, and then it also became a love song for adoptees everywhere. So this is titled, How Music Stays in the Body. Your body is a song called Birth or First Mother, a miracle that gave birth to another exquisite song. One song raises 3 boys with the white husband. One song fought an American war overseas. One song leapt from 14 stories high and like a dead bird shattered into the clouds. Most forgot the lyrics to their own bodies or decided to paint abstracts of mountains or moons in the shape of your face. I've been told mothers don't forget the body. I can't remember your face, the shape, or story, or how you held me the day I was born, so I wrote 1,000 poems to survive. I want to sing with you in an open field, a simple room, or a quiet bar. I want to hear your opinions about angels. Truth is, angels drink too. Soju spilled on the halo, white wings sticky with gin, as if any mother could forget the music that left her. You should hear how loudly I sing now. I've become a ballad of wild dreams and coping mechanisms. I can breathe now through any fire. I imagine I got this from him or you, my earthly inheritance. Your arms, your sigh, your heavy song. I know all the lyrics. I know all the blood. I know why angels howl into the moonlight. All right, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Congratulations.
Lee Herrick, that is so beautiful. Can you hear me? Where did you go? Come back up here. Come back up here. I want you to come over here. No, okay. I love it. I love it. I want to thank everybody for coming. Lee, Max, come on up here, all the poets. Jack, sit with Annie because she won't do as she's told. She just wants to sit over there. She wants to do her own thing. So like Lee was just saying, I hope each of you take a stab at writing, at accessing the poet that lives, as he said, within each and every one of us. That was so beautiful. Wow. And this has been an extraordinary evening for me. Thank you, Annie, so much for being who you are. And Jack, for being who you are. Jack and I are great friends. And to Trudy and Neil for sharing you both with us this evening. Thank you all for sharing your time, which is your most valuable resource. I know everybody here could be someplace else. And for me, writing poetry, I think, like you were saying, is a really holy experience. And I believe all of us have a voice within that we may not know, but if we sit quietly and allow that voice to speak, it might give us an understanding of our lives that we didn't know, and it might give us some peace that we've been searching for and longing for even. So I hope you take a stab at it. I hope you enjoy I Am Maria. I hope you maybe turn to the person next to you and introduce yourself by your first name only, and let them do the same and know that that is enough. Amen. Thank you very much. God bless you.